November the 20th, 2021 was just like any other day in 18-year-old Bobby Ann McLeod's life. A day she had spent at home with her parents and her older brother Lee at their family home in Plymouth, a small port city in the southwest of England. At around 5:45 p.m. that evening, Bobby had left her home in Layham, telling her father that she loved him for what would be the final time. She made her way to the bus stop just 4 minutes away on Bampton Road with plans to see her boyfriend. The winter air was cold and it had already begun to get dark out, but we know that Bobby did make it to the bus stop that night. A passerby recalled seeing the teen between 6:05 and 6:15 p.m. looking up and down the street to check for her bus. This would be the final sighting of Bobby Ann McLeod alive. Cody James Ackland was a promising 24-year-old Plymouth musician, a guitarist in the indie rock band Rakuda. He was credited for being the main songwriter and lead guitarist, but under this guise was a very dark individual. Little did those around Cody know is that he had developed a morbid fascination with Ted Bundy, a serial killer who was executed in 1989 after kidnapping, sexually assaulting and murdering at least 30 women and girls during the 1970s. On Cody's phone were over 3,000 disturbing images that included dismembered bodies, post-mortems and murder scenes that he'd collected. In a cruel twist of fate that put her in the wrong place at the wrong time, Bobby had waited at the bus stop that evening, the same evening that Cody Ackland had finally decided to follow through with a disturbing fantasy that he'd been having for a long time. Days prior, he'd researched hammers, crowbars, cutting tools, baseball bats, ski masks, balaclavas and waterproof clothing, as well as possible sites where a body could be disposed of. This showed clear indication that he was planning to carry out an attack. Further examination into Cody's search history indicated that he had looked for information about several murderers, including the Golden State Killer Joseph DeAngelo Jr., Andre Chikatilo, Ivan Milat, Fred West and Tommy Sells, whilst also searching for images of their victims' bodies. As Bobby stood waiting at the bus stop, Cody Ackland, who had noticed her as he drove by, had parked his Ford Fiesta at the bottom of the bank behind the bus shelter. Quietly, he snuck up behind Bobby. Even if she had noticed Cody that night, standing at just 4'11", she wouldn't have stood a chance against her attacker. Using a claw hammer that he'd purchased days earlier, Cody struck an unsuspecting Bobby McLeod hard, twice around the head. According to an account by Cody later on to police, he said that he had randomly chanced upon Bobby that night and had chosen her because she reminded him of an ex-girlfriend. He admitted that their eyes had met as she'd fallen to the ground, and he recalled hearing her say that she was scared. He admitted to police that the attack was meant to be it, but as he walked back to his Ford Fiesta, he saw Bobby Ann moving, so drove back and kidnapped the bleeding teenager by violently bundling her into the footwell of his car. He then drove her around 19 miles to a car park at Believer Forest on the fringes of Dartmoor, where he hit her a total of 12 more times with the claw hammer, causing multiple catastrophic injuries to her head and face, during what was branded as a prolonged, frenzied and sadistic attack. Describing the moments after he had battered the teenager in a police interview, Cody had said, "It's not funny, but she started to make a noise and I thought, wow, hats off to her." After finally stomping on her neck, Cody put her body into the boot of his red car and drove more than 25 miles to Bovisand, on the eastern side of Plymouth Sound, where he stripped her of her clothes and some jewellery and dumped her body in an undergrowth down a slope. He had taken her clothes not in a sexual way, he said, but because he believed that it would be harder to identify her. Bobby Ann's shoe was found close by. It would soon come to light that at 7:15 p.m, a local man had already stumbled across Bobby Ann's mobile phone and her AirPods case at the bus stop. He gave them to the bus driver who had arrived at 7:23 p.m, but they both assumed someone had lost them. At 7:45 p.m, Cody had disposed of Bobby Ann's body, leaving her naked and face down in the mud, down a 15-foot steep bank, before burning her handbag nearby, along with other items from the vehicle. He'd posted pictures and videos of him and his friends partying on the same beach just weeks before Bobby Ann was murdered. One image posted to his Instagram in May showed a bonfire on the sand as the sun set over the sea. Meanwhile, as the hours ticked by, it would be Bobby Ann's boyfriend who first raised the alarm at 9 p.m. after she didn't show up to his home as planned. He phoned the family home asking if she was there. Her family called friends and her brother went out looking for her. Concern began to spread across social media, and the next day, members of the community and the police joined in the search. By this point, police had launched an extensive missing persons case and made public appeals for help, along with her brother Lee, who had made an emotional plea on Facebook for people to help find his sister, stating that he knew someone had taken her. After the murder, Cody drove to the village of Tamerton Folliot and threw the hammer into the river and a carrier bag containing blood-stained clothing into allotments. The hammer was never found despite a lengthy police search. The next morning, a local schoolboy who had seen Bobby Ann waiting for the bus the night before had found her AirPods on a path behind the bus stop. The day after murdering Bobby Ann, Cody went into Plymouth, had a pizza, attended band practice, and drank into the early hours of Monday the 22nd of November. His friends had described how he laughed and hugged them as he socialised in the hours after the attack, appearing a lot happier than usual. He also called in sick from his job as a car valeter. Later that day, he'd taken himself to the cinema to see a science fiction film. On Tuesday the 23rd of November, Cody Ackland left work at a valeting department of a Plymouth garage around noon and never returned. He then sent a string of strange messages to his friends, family, and members of his rock band saying he loved them, and at 1:30 p.m, he walked into Charles Cross Police Station. Wearing a face mask and a high-vis jacket from his job, he calmly approached the front desk with his arms behind his back and gave himself up. After confessing to Bobby Ann's murder, Cody Ackland asked for a map and directed detectives to Bovisand, where police found Bobby Ann's body at 3:45 p.m. Bobby Ann's remains were identified using dental records, whilst phone data corroborated Cody's story, placing him in the same area as Bobby Ann around the time that she disappeared. During his police interview, Cody Ackland had told police that the murder had been like a film or a fantasy, and it felt as though someone else had committed the crime. He was not in contact with any mental health authorities, although he did complain to police that he'd suffered from a bad childhood. His father David, a former soldier and stunt driver, and his mother Helen had split up when he was a child, but police have found no trigger that explains why he turned into a killer. Psychiatrists examined him in prison, but found no mental illness that would allow him to plead diminished responsibility in court. Cody Ackland had no choice but to plead guilty to murder at Plymouth Crown Court on April 5, 2022. On May the 19th, he was finally sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 30 years and 190 days. The judge told him he may never be released. Bobby Ann's family issued a statement thanking police for searching for Bobby Ann and locating her body. Cody Ackland's former band also issued a statement to tell the public that the band would be disbanding with immediate effect. Deciding to take a short break from the music scene, they also sent their thoughts and sentiments to Bobby Ann McLeod's family and friends.